Imagine you are on 100 miles long bike ride and you wake up one morning and something just isn't quite right. It turns out that something is really sinister. It's your heart. That is a big time wake up call. That is what happened to my guests here on the program today. Tony Schiera is a bike rider who was making this pilgrimage all the way from Indianapolis down to Washington, D.C., along with his wife, Rachel, when tragedy nearly struck. They are here today, though, to talk about an incredible transformation that they have had now for the past year and a half, having adopted a completely plant-based diet. And boy, is Tony ever reaping the benefits. And I know that there's been a trickle-down effect with your family as well. So I'm really excited to be sharing this story with the exam roomies today. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Tony, let's jump right in here. So this happened July of 2021. Leading up to this really long bike ride, had you had any indication that something was amiss?
Well, in hindsight, I had lots of little indicators, but everything could have been explained away with like, oh, didn't sleep well last night, or COVID. I mean, been teaching. I'm a teacher, and the university where I was working, we went completely digital, and I wasn't moving around. I was sitting, so I was gaining weight, not getting it off. Having done long distance bike trips years prior in the summers, I knew in the spring coming up to this big trip, I was going to lose weight in training for the trip and on the trip. So I wasn't too worried about the weight that wasn't coming off, even though I was training just as hard as I was before. And things like that. Some, swelling, ankle swelling, and things like that.
Yeah. With the pandemic here, it just got me to thinking, like, so many of us went from being more active, even if we weren't athletes per se. You commute, for a lot of us, that meant at least walking, to the office, even out of the car, as opposed to just across the hall from your bedroom to your office at home, right? And then you become completely sedentary. Do you think that, that just short time frame between the start of the pandemic leading up to the bike ride was really the catalyst for this? Or do you think that the seeds for what happened were planted many years ago?
Many years ago, I quite honestly, I was expecting something like this to happen, but not when I was in my 50s. I was expecting it in my early 60s. Heart disease runs in my family. And at the time, we had thought we were doing okay with our diet, even though about a year prior to this, we were not living together. Rachel started a new job here in South Carolina, and I stayed behind in Pennsylvania so our son could finish high school. And we were eating like two single guys, a lot of meat, not much in vegetables, but I'm sure that contributed to it, but it wasn't anything this was in my family. And I don't think the diet that we ate in that year could have contributed to blockages that I had. They did, but not like we were good before, now they're bad. In that year, it wouldn't have done that.
Rachel, let me ask you. I mean, Tony said that he kind of felt like this was inevitable. Had he shared those concerns with you previously?
Oh yeah, I mean, the heart conditions within his family, I think it's artery blockage is mostly what your family struggles with. I knew this because his father had issues, his brother has issues, so we knew going into it that he would also have issues. But again, we were eating something toward a Mediterranean diet, I would say. Not limiting, we weren't limiting meat though. I mean, meat was probably a once a day event for sure.
Right.
And dairy and cheese and all of these things that are part of that's part of a Mediterranean diet, olive oil. This was something that I knew about, but I thought I was doing the right thing for.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, most of us still put cheese, dairy, lean meats into that healthy category, not quite realizing what what they actually are. Let me ask you about the day of the incident, as you called it, when you so eloquently wrote about it on Forks Over Knives. Tony, what do you remember about that day? Walk us through it from the time that you woke up.
I woke up feeling nauseous and not understanding why, but feeling very dizzy and dry heaving. Got myself out of the tent, and Rachel was already on the phone calling 911. I was very lethargic, just kind of wanted to sit there. I was awake, just didn't feel like opening my eyes. I was talking. I didn't have any pain anywhere. It was just I just didn't feel right. And I don't know, how long did it take for the ambulance to get there?
7 minutes.
Yeah, in that time, felt like a long time, but by the time they got there, I was feeling a little bit better. And as time expanded away from the event, I felt better, and it became like what was that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened once the ambulance arrived? I mean, obviously you're taken to the hospital. What kind of news are you expecting at that point?
The EMTs were like, oh, it's got to be electrolytes because you're on this really long bike ride. You're probably not hydrated enough, which I knew was not the case at all, which was kind of alarming. Once he had said that, it was like, well, I know that's not going to be it. And it didn't. It turned out it wasn't. Got to the hospital, and I'm like, well, we're going to run some tests. And they found tryptophan. Is that the enzyme? If you have a heart attack, there's an enzyme in your blood that I can't remember what it's called, but mine was elevated. Like there was some sort of event with my heart, but they weren't sure. This being a very small hospital, it was our first stop. They said, well, we can't really tell much going on. We want to send you to Pittsburgh because there's a great heart hospital there. They can find out anything that's going on. So we're going to send you there. And they did. 2 hours later, I was on another ambulance speeding up through Pittsburgh to go to the hospital there.
And Rachel, what level of concern did you have at this point? Initially you're being told, well, maybe it's dehydration. Tony says he's feeling a little bit better. And then suddenly it's like, boom, no, we got to shift you over to Pittsburgh for a higher level of care. What kind of emotions are you dealing with at that point?
A lot of stress. That was awful. And before he remembers anything that went on, there were other things happening that precipitated me getting out of the tent and making a phone call. So he doesn't even remember what happened before that. He woke me up at about 6:30 a.m. moaning, and I could not rouse him, even though he was sitting up and he had his eyes closed, but he was moaning and making noises. I couldn't get him to stop moaning, and he wasn't responding to his name, and I even shook him, and he wasn't responding to anything. And then he took a great big deep breath, and he just collapsed on his pillow, and he stopped breathing. And that's when I stepped out of the tent. So there was a lot of concern because nobody could articulate what that was about. Nobody could define what that had been. So there was a lot of concern on my end. I mean, I just felt like I had no idea what was going on. So there was a lot of stress and a lot of concern. And also, we didn't have. This is the other thing. We had no car. Like we were on our bikes. We were on. Right. These are contained bikes. So we had no vehicles. We had a tent. I had like one set of clothes. Like we were disgusting. We smelled bad. We'd been biking for many weeks, and so there's just a lot of stress going in a lot of different directions.
So before the day, how far had you come? You departed from Indianapolis. Where were you at this point when everything started?
We were probably at mile like 700.
Okay.
750.
750 of our trip.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a long way to be riding. That's for daggone sure.
Especially with multiple blockages. I was very impressed.
No kidding, right? So let's get back to Pittsburgh then. You're whisked there, and I'm assuming that they run more tests. What did you discover at that point?
Got there, they put me in right away for angioplasty exploration to see what the status of, and they said 3 things are going to happen. 1, we're going to put some stents in. 2, we're going to find that we can't have any blockages. Your blockages are too great for stents. Or 3, you're going to die. That was what I was told. And they went in
and signed this paper.
Yeah, signed this paper. So they went in and they found, they said at least 3 that were 80 to 100% blocked. And then Rachel finally showed up, and they said, well, we want to get you in for bypass surgery. This is a Friday. The surgeon, we're sure, probably can do it on Monday afternoon. But you're going to stay in the hospital until Monday, and then sometime after that.
So again, like even though you say you were expecting this at some point, this still must have hit you like a ton of bricks, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. And the other piece of this is that he's so fit. He's made a 700-mile bike ride. We both have, plus all of the training that goes into that beforehand. And so, on the outside, he had definitely some weight to lose, but he was, he's quite fit. So that's the other thing that it's like, how could this have happened if you exercise so well? And that's definitely something I still hear from people is, how could he have had this happen? He's so fit.
Is that something that you said to the doctors? I'm curious what their take might have been.
I don't think we ever asked.
No,
they weren't. It's not the kind of I don't want to name the institution, but it's not the kind of institution that would have responded to that with any sort of explanation.
Gotcha.
Explanation or even acknowledgement of it. Because of that, I was so far out of the age range, health range. I don't know what else. Even because I was so young. Dietary range. Of the people that normally have bypass surgery at this institution, the fact that I had been on this bike ride, we were riding 50 to 70 miles a day, and it suddenly stopped. And after the surgery, they wouldn't let me eat anything until I farted. And that was so hard because my body was screaming for food because of all the activity. The body's still at that level, but even though I'm not doing anything, and it's been 3 days, but I was just dying of hunger, figuratively speaking, very, very uncomfortable because of that, even more so uncomfortable from that than from the surgery. But there was no like, I'm sorry, we have to have you pass gas before we can give you anything to eat.
Yeah.
So it was that idea that I didn't fall into the category of the people I normally treat.
So I want to ask you the morning of the surgery. I mean, you've got the three options that are laid out in front of you. The last of which is really not the one that you're hoping for. I mean, I know that this is I don't want to call it a softball question, but I think a lot of people who have never been in that position are curious about what that actually feels like from the patient perspective. What were you dealing with before being wheeled in?
That's not a softball question.
No, it's not one I actually has been asked. I was more honestly interested in the machinery that was going to be going on. And in fact, as they wheeled me in, I saw the heart-lung machine that I was going to be bypassed through, and I was asking them a little bit about it. Maybe that was to take my mind off of the impending surgery. I'm not sure, but maybe it's fatalistic. I'm going to live or die. It could be today, or it could be in 15 years. It's kind of that's what was going on in my mind.
And what about for you, Rachel? What was it like from your perspective?
It was very stressful. So I was very fortunate in that my daughter, I have an older daughter who's actually in a physician's assistant program and was fascinated by this whole process. She came down to be with me during the surgery. And then my sister-in-law also came from Maryland to Pittsburgh to also be with me. So all of the stress and concern that I was feeling in place of him just wondering about the heart and lung machine, I got to do all the other emotional stress and processing. It was a super stressful experience and definitely not one I would want to go through again. Thus the changes that we made.
Absolutely. And we're about to get to them because boy, you want to talk about some wholesale changes. You guys, y'all are the gold standard now. So with the surgery, I believe they found 5 major blockages. How long did the actual procedure last? Do you remember that?
I think it was about 7 hours, I want to say. So when he went in, they said it's going to take, they said it was going to take about 4.5 to 5, unless something was really wrong. And then it took way longer. And so that was also a concern for me. He had no idea what was going on.
We were told that there were 3 for sure they wanted to bypass, but when they got in there, they found 2 more.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, that just must have ratcheted up the stress even more. I can't imagine being in your shoes that day, Rachel. It's my dad says that the patient actually has the easiest job. All they have to do is go to sleep and wake back up. But the family members who are sitting there waiting for news are the ones that are having perhaps the roughest day with all of that worry.
I agree after that experience. Yeah.
So quintuple bypass. I mean, that is a big, big, big deal. How did you feel coming out of that?
My dad had triple bypass. And in the back of my mind, I'm listening. I remember him complaining that he said, had he known what it was going to be like post-surgery, he wouldn't have gone through it. And my dad was never, he was a smoker, a lifelong smoker, heavy drinker, lifelong drinker, eventually came clean with Alcoholics Anonymous. But, pardon me, I had that going back in the back of my mind and thinking, well, I'm not a smoker. I'm in much better shape than he ever was. And we'll see how this goes. Honestly, I didn't think the post-surgery issue was that bad. Pardon me. There was some discomfort with it. I didn't call for any. I called once, I think, for some morphine, and that was it.
Okay, here I got to be real with you. He doesn't remember a lot of the post-surgery stuff.
Gotcha.
Again,
Okay.
that was mine to carry. So
right. Of course, your burden to bear. I got you. So let's talk about this. In reading your story that you wrote, one of the things that really stuck out to me, and one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have you guys on the show was, well, you started to talk about, well, what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? What dietary changes, what lifestyle changes can we make to ensure that he's healthy moving forward? And the quote that you were given was essentially the cardiologist made it clear to take the medication and eat whatever you want, but expect to be back within 10 to 20 years for a redo.
yes.
I mean, that must have been mind-numbingly frustrating. That certainly was not the answer you could have been hoping for.
Yeah, and I don't know I can't remember if I put it in the article, but he also said you could change your diet, but who could be a monk? And I was like, girl, hold my beer. Like, I got this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just his job is to tear apart and put back together. That's what a surgeon's job is. And it's unfortunate that is the case within this world of medicine that we live in, but that's what a cardiologist does, a lot of the time. So the dietary piece is ascribed to someone else within our system, which I think is a hot mess, but that's just me. But that's what's going on. It's unfair, but I understand where he was coming from. But I was also like, Dad, I got this.
Yeah. So your beer was held, and instead of scrapping, you went and you started to do a little bit of research. What then did you find in terms of the connection between dietary choices and heart health that really surprised you?
So what the one piece of advice I did manage to squeeze out of the institution that we were served at was to eat a carb forward diet, and I'd never heard of that before. So I went online and I Googled carb forward diet and Esselstyn. Esselstyn is the one that came up. And then I thought, Cleveland Clinic. We were just in Cleveland. That was one of the places that we had biked through. So I went in and read a lot of the research behind the Esselstyn diet. And as I read more and more, I was convinced. I mean, I read the research. We both have doctorates, so I know how to read research. So after I'd gone in and done that, I was like, this is it. This is the science that I was looking for. This is what we do. And that's the whole food, plant-based, no oil diet.
Tony, I mean, you were the heart patient here. And it sounds like before you have been living kind of a pseudo bachelor lifestyle with lots of meat before that, after your wife got the new job here. How difficult of a transition was it for you, though? I mean, I know that you also had been eating that Mediterranean diet, but were you skeptical at all of when Rachel came in and was like, "Hey, no meat, no dairy, only whole foods"? That's a big transition there, man.
No, not at all. It was definitely more psychological than it was physical.
Okay.
And we even talked about like, how is it going to be good? We've lived all over the world, and we're familiar with different foods, and we knew it was going to be okay and good, but if I can't have steak, that the mouthfeel of what a steak is, and mixed with the mashed potato and green beans and all that, it's going to be missing all of that, that experience. As we stayed in Pennsylvania for 2 or 3 weeks, in our daughter's apartment. She was off working at a summer camp, so we were able to stay there for my post-operative recovery period. And that's when we began to experiment. And every day, Rachel would work a little bit in the kitchen and say, okay, let's try something. Let's try this. And we came across lots of different recipes and substitutions and things to do. And it became clear over that few weeks we were there that, okay, we could do this, because it's not so much the flavor, but the texture of food that we enjoy, that I enjoy, that we can approximate and get close. And we've done pretty well. There's only one or two things that we just can't do. Cheese is one of them. And particularly, I'm a Wisconsin guy, born and raised there for my first 10 years. So I miss hard cheese, like no business. But, stuff that we found, it's all comes out like a nuclear cheese, like a liquid cheese sauce. It's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not the same.
Hey man, look, the thing that I love about a whole food plant-based diet is the creativity. You guys were just talking about replicating those flavors, even some of the mouthfeel. Save the hard cheese, which one? I'm not sure. I'm kind of with you guys. I'm not sure that I've seen a good recipe for that out there just yet, but I'm sure that it's coming.
That's the thing. It's because you can't have any oil in it. That's the trick.
There you go.
Unless you found something for us. You got something for us, Chuck.
I got nothing for you. If I had one, I would gleefully share it with you right now, but the search continues. So if somebody's listening or watching right now, one of the roomies who's really plugged into the plant-based scene.
Roomies are the best. If they know they got something for me, right?
I'm telling, come on, let's crowdsource this thing. All right. Cheese it up. The healthy cheeses, bring them on.
And we want the hard cheese, specifying the hard cheese. Yeah, I got the liquid cheese knocked. I got that one.
It's got to be hard cheese. Got to be the hard cheese. Yeah. Have you guys had Rip Esselstyn's cheesy chickpea recipe? That is not a hard cheese by any stretch.
I think I've done that one.
So simple, so good. It's nutritional yeast, liquid aminos, chickpeas. Boom, done.
Shout out to those Esselstyn recipes, man. Those are
dude. I mean, Rip man, he's got that down.
And the new book that Jane and that they just put out, the Woman Warrior.
Yep.
That one.
Yep, How to Be a Plant-Based Woman Warrior. They were just on the show not too terribly long ago.
I know, I listened to it.
They are a trip. Oh, well, I don't have to tell you. Those two are like, I love them, man. If you could bottle their energy, man, I'm telling you what, that's your $1 million ticket right there. Yes, so you start making these dietary changes. You've just had the surgery. Your blood pressure going into this had been borderline high. I believe your cholesterol might have been also elevated. How did those change as your diet progressed?
Can I do this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do that one.
This was a scary thing that happened. So his body reacted positively so quickly to this dietary change that he went hypotensive, and we had to take him to the emergency room, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. They just were like, he's hypotensive, lay off the medicine for a little bit. He went back on, and then he went hypotensive again. And when we called the cardiologist's office, they were like, take him off that medicine and just monitor his blood pressure, which we did. And I was so floored when it stayed right. I mean, it was like better blood pressure than I have. And I've always had a really good blood pressure. And that's where it stayed.
Wow.
And the only thing that can explain it is the diet. He's not on any meds for it anymore.
So when we're talking borderline high, what was it, before this whole situation unfolded?
It was like 140 over 90, typically.
130, 140. Yeah.
And what about cholesterol? I know that that improved immensely for both of you here.
Yeah. It was elevated. I don't remember my numbers, but I
want to say like 260.
Yeah.
280.
Yeah.
Something like that. And now it's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I love that. How about yours, Rachel? How big of an improvement did you see?
Mine is not ridiculous, but it's still good. So mine was generally holding like around 220, which is, high, but it's not too high.
Yeah.
And now last time I had it checked, non-fasting was 180.
And Tony, how are you feeling today, man? I mean, you look really fit, energetic, dare I say, young and spry. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm still coming out of and finding different ways that I'm still recovering from the surgery itself. I feel great. There's I'm much more conscious of the sleep that I get and the food that I eat. There's still an adjustment period. We were talking the other day about, when this diet first started, I had to eat probably 4 times a day, 4 times a day, just to feel like I was full. And that's getting less and less now. But I did have a 4 full meal day a couple of days ago, and I was full all day, which doesn't happen very often, but I wasn't uncomfortably full and I wasn't uncomfortably hungry either.
So I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Like, this is a long transition arc. Like,
Yeah.
I know some people who've been on your show have talked about, oh, it just takes a few weeks. We found that it was a long arc, even until now. Like, we are still adjusting. We're still, our microbiome is still adjusting. Our taste is even shifting. But you're much more aware of it, I think, when you eat like this, because perhaps the diet's so clean. I don't know why. But, I feel very in touch with my body. I know you feel very in touch with your body. So that's good.
It is a little bit different for everybody. I always worry that, some people think because they hear it from one person, it has to be that way for everybody. But it can be a really quick arc, or it can be that longer arc that you're talking about. And the bottom line is you're moving in a healthier direction. And in the case of you, Tony, like, it's a much healthier direction. You said at the beginning of the show, like, you always expected this to happen when you were in your 60s. Knowing what you do now, with all of the research, you see your numbers improve, your heart's beating healthfully, your arteries, I'm sure, are much more open these days. How differently are you feeling about the future?
I think the possibility of outliving my grandfather, who died at a heart attack when he was 64, and my dad at 67, is greatly improved. I feel really good about where the longevity of my life because of this change, more so than I had prior to surgery. I mean, I kind of figured that before the event, I would, in my 60s, I'd probably have a life-ending heart attack. It just by nature that it was going to happen.
The quality of life better too.
Yeah,
man. I mean, I know the feeling, man. There was a time when I didn't think I was going to live to see 30. When I was, 420 pounds, I couldn't walk 10 feet without, feeling like I was going to keel over from a heart attack. It was frightening. And now the future looks much different and much brighter. And, there's, I guess there's an immense comfort that comes with that every single day. It just makes me, a little bit happier. And I'm sure it's much the same for you, So let's talk about, you also here have lost a little bit of weight. How much weight have you lost so far?
Lost like 40, right?
Yeah.
40 pounds.
40 pounds.
Post-surgery, I was like 210, and I'm about 165, 170 now.
Yeah.
Here's the crazy thing, though. Like, the weight holds. Like, the weight, we lost this weight, and there has been no variation up and down.
Yeah.
From a year and a half ago, and we're not young. So you expect everybody I work with who's like my age, they're like, oh, the pounds, 10 pounds. I just look at food, I put on 10 pounds. I'm like, I eat as much as I want. My weight ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
So that's a real nice side benefit. It's for like our exam roomies who are like the old ladies like me. Yep.
Hey, man.
It, right?
Yeah. Well, look, you say you look at food, you gain 10 pounds. A lot of people feel that way. You've lost 10 pounds. You've kept it off.
And it's
no
just
question about it.
No effort.
Yeah.
I find the same thing here. I've plateaued, and I've stayed at this weight now for 6 years, and I feel absolutely fantastic. I don't count calories or anything like that. Do you guys bother calorie counting or watching your fat grams or anything?
We did it first.
Hardcore before the event.
Yeah.
So we know exactly what we ate for like 2 years before this happened.
Yeah.
Like, by the day, we were really good. But not anymore. And eventually, every now and again, I'll open up an app and I'll track just for a couple of days just to look at macros, because I do half marathon running.
Yeah.
So I like to make sure that, that my intake is balanced, basically. Yeah. But it always is. I'm almost like, I don't know why I check anymore, because it's always balanced.
It's just nice to know from time to time. It's just nice to
Yeah.
know. Let's talk about food specifics here. I think that there are some roomies here who are probably wondering, well, okay, they eat healthier, but what exactly are they eating these days? Walk us through a typical day, if you don't mind.
So we are oatmeal devotees. We eat
Yeah.
oatmeal every day, and it's like the Rip Bowl times 1,000. So we load up the oatmeal bowl. So always kale or spinach in the oatmeal bowl.
Okay.
And then we eat raw oatmeal. We don't cook it typically. So we'll put a couple of handfuls of raw oatmeal, flax seeds, hemp seeds. I do nuts. He doesn't do nuts. Fruit, berries, always berries. And then I think it was Christy Funk who talked about the matcha powder.
Yep.
The power of the cinnamon, the turmeric, and the pinch of pepper. So that always goes in the oatmeal bowl. Just lots of bananas, dates. I'll put dates in mine.
Spinach, kale.
I already said that.
I did that.
Man, that's like a kitchen sink oatmeal, you know?
Yeah.
That
It's
is
so good.
any and everything.
I used to go to bed dreaming about the coffee I could have in the morning. Even now I'm thinking about the oatmeal I get to have in the morning.
Yeah. So you guys do I'm assuming it's you do like overnight oats and then you just pile everything in there?
No, the oats are raw. So we throw the oats in raw.
Yeah.
Don't even cook them.
Wow. Y'all are hardcore.
For a little, like 30 seconds.
Like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Y'all, man. Okay. Y'all are setting the standard today. Y'all are setting the standard today.
Yep.
All right. So we've got oatmeal there and a Rip Bowl times 1,000. Yeah. What's
That's
lunch looking like?
That's a challenge for Rip Esselstyn, right?
Well,
I'll pass it along to Rip. Don't you worry.
Let's talk about dinner first, because for me and for you too, lunch is leftovers from the night before. Usually. Yeah.
So what's for dinner? I'm assuming it's no longer beef.
No. So let's see. Like I'm thinking, last night we had mac and cheese out of How Not to Die. I think from that cookbook is where we got the recipe for that, where you're basically like boiling your veggies until they're tender, whizzing them up in the food processor, putting in some spices, putting in some spices, and then pouring it, and then baking it, pouring it over the noodles, and then baking it with nutritional yeast. And so, broccoli, put broccoli in it too, and then have that with a kale salad or a kale Caesar salad. And there's dinner. And then I've gotten really good at making sweet potato chocolate cake with
I mean, we got to talk about that for a second here. Sweet potato chocolate cake. Let's discuss.
It is so good. Okay, so this one, take a chunky sweet potato. So one sweet potato, peel it, chop it up, boil it, or put it in your microwave. Either way, it takes about 5 minutes. And then you're going to mix that with a little bit of flaxseed, again, turmeric, a little pinch of pepper, some more matcha powder, and that's just, to add the benefits. It's not necessarily for flavor. Cocoa powder, you put in a bunch of cocoa powder, a little bit of applesauce, whiz that all up with a little bit of ground oatmeal, and then bake it, and you get a cake. And it's so good, and it's so moist, and it tastes like it is full of eggs and butter, but it's not, it's just the sweet potato, right?
That might be happening here in the Carroll house very soon.
Yeah. So and then I make an icing also out of sweet potatoes, and the icing is pretty much the same thing, but without the oatmeal in it. So it stays thin, and you put that on top, and it's like, that kid, we talked about a biker who visited us from La Plata, who was biking 140 miles a day before we got on there. He had 3 pieces of it when he stayed with us, and he had no idea. He thought it was full of eggs and sugar, and he just about died. He thought it was wonderful.
He finished up. There was 3 pieces left, and he was like, "Eat them all."
Wow!
And he's 18, and the kid can eat. So if I can fool an 18-year-old kid who's on his bike, I think I can fool anyone with that cake.
Well done. Well done indeed. Well, look, you guys are just phenomenal. Tony, I'm so glad that you made it through, my friend. And I'm so glad that the future looks so much brighter and healthier for you. And I agree, man. I have no doubt in my mind that you certainly will live well beyond your 60s into your 70s and just keep right on going, man. You've made a tremendous transition. And I think that you're actually going to become an inspiration for quite a lot of people. And you certainly have one heck of a partner in Healthy Crime by your side.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here without her.
No doubt about it. Well, listen, Tony and Rachel Schiera, thank you both so very much for your time. And Rachel, thank you for the recipe. Outstanding work.
You're welcome. And thank you for the show. I really appreciate it.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.